Okay, so here in the United States, the NFL isn't just a sport, right? It's a monster, a cultural and financial juggernaut, a true titan. But the league has its sights set on a new goal, conquering the entire world. And let me tell you, that path is proving to be a lot harder than a simple four-down drive.
So that's the big question, isn't it? Why has this game, this uniquely American spectacle that's so incredibly successful at home, had such a hard time finding its footing abroad? What exactly gets lost in translation when you take it overseas? Well, let's get into it and try to solve this thing.
All right, so the NFL's first big swing at this was super ambitious. They created a whole new league designed to stretch right across the Atlantic. It was called NFL Europe, and its story, man, it's this fascinating case study of what happens when you try to export America's favorite game.
And when you look at the timeline, it really tells a story of, well, a lot of starts and stops. It kicks off in 1991 with this really bold model, teams in both North America and Europe. But bam, just 2 years later, it's suspended. It comes back in 95, this time focusing only on Europe, gets a rebrand to NFL Europe, but by 2007, it was totally gone, for good. So what on earth happened?
Well, here's where it gets really weird. The divide was just incredible. Over in Europe, the league was a genuine hit. I mean, wildly popular. You had the London Monarchs pulling in 45,000 fans on average. That's huge. But back in the States, crickets. It was pretty much ignored, with absolutely terrible TV ratings. How could the same thing be a hit in one place and a total dud back home?
But here's the thing. The league had this one major success that often gets overlooked. It was an amazing place to develop talent. And you don't need to look any further than the legendary Kurt Warner. I mean, think about this. One year he's quarterbacking the Amsterdam Admirals, and the very next year he's lifting the Super Bowl trophy as the MVP. It was proof that this system could actually produce bona fide NFL superstars.
But at the end of the day, it all comes down to the bottom line. And the number that really mattered, the one that ended the whole experiment, was this one. The league was losing a reported $30 million a year. So even with all those passionate fans in places like Germany and the Netherlands, and even with its amazing success in developing players, those kinds of financial losses were just impossible to keep up with. And just like that, the dream was over.
So the collapse of NFL Europe, it wasn't just about the money. It was pointing to something much deeper, a fundamental problem with the game itself, at least when you try to take it global. And this is what we're going to call the accessibility problem. It's the key to understanding why other sports have had a much easier time making that jump.
And look, you just have to look at the numbers to see what I mean. The NBA right now has a whopping 125 international players on its rosters. The NFL? Just 19. I mean, that is a massive gap. And it's not just a random statistic, it tells you everything about the global talent pipeline. It really makes you wonder, why is one sports pipeline a raging river while the others is barely a trickle?
It really all boils down to what it takes to just start playing. Think about football. You need all this expensive gear, pads, helmets, the whole thing. You need to understand a rule book that is notoriously complex, and you have to be okay with the pretty high risk of injury. Now think about basketball or soccer. What do you need? A ball and a bit of space. That's it. The game flows, the basic rules make sense pretty quickly, and it's just so much easier for a kid anywhere on the planet to pick it up and play. Basketball really had the perfect storm for going global. First, you have that super low barrier to entry we just talked about. Then, you get a once-in-a-generation global superstar like Michael Jordan. Plus, it's a game where one single player can totally take over and have a massive impact. Throw in the cultural explosion of the 1992 Olympic Dream Team and the insane marketing power of shoe brands and fashion, and you've basically got the perfect recipe for global domination. A recipe that football, so far, just hasn't been able to copy.
Okay, so after NFL Europe folded, the league didn't just pack its bags and go home. Nope, it just ripped up the old playbook and wrote a new one. But this current strategy, it's a whole different kind of gamble, and the stakes are arguably even higher.
The new philosophy is actually pretty simple, but it's a huge shift. Instead of building a whole separate minor league overseas, the NFL decided to just export the real deal, the main event, actual, meaningful regular season games. They're taking the whole spectacle, the star players, the famous teams, everything, and planting it directly in places like London, Mexico City, and more recently, Germany. But, and this is a big but, this new plan has a major potential flaw. You risk ticking off the very fans back home in America that built the league into a giant in the first place. I mean, a game in London means a 9:30 in the morning kickoff for fans on the East Coast. If you're on the West Coast, you're waking up at 6:30 a.m. to watch your team. So the NFL is walking this tightrope, trying to win over new fans across the world without frustrating the loyal core audience that pays the bills.
And all of this really brings us back to a huge fundamental question about the sport's identity. Could it be that American football's greatest strength, the thing that makes it so popular in the US, is actually its greatest weakness when it goes abroad? Is it possible that this is, at its very core, a uniquely American game? Think about it. Unlike basketball, where a single superstar can just take over a game, football is the ultimate team sport. It's really a series of complex, strategic battles that have been planned out to the smallest detail. It's more than just a sport. It's kind of like a cultural artifact. And trying to export a cultural artifact, well, that's a whole lot harder than just handing someone a rule book.
So here we are. The NFL is betting billions of dollars that its game can break through these barriers and cross any border. But the fundamental nature of the sport itself, all that complexity, those high barriers to entry, its deep, deep American roots, that's putting up one heck of a defense. So the real question moving forward isn't just, can the NFL play games around the world? We know they can. The real question is, will the rest of the world ever truly fall in love with America's game?